Yo, what's up everybody? Good morning. Today we are back for part 2 of the PKV EDC knife. FYI, I have not decided on a name for this. So if you have an idea for a great name for this knife, let me know in the comments. But I just finished up a few handles yesterday, so I've got 5 that I'm working on. I'm a little bit ahead, but I've got an order of 12. So, next step. So this is what we forged out. So here's one of the blades that I forged out the other day. And what I did was I took my template before I put these handles on over here, and I just drew out around it, or traced it. That way I'm consistent with each one. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it to the angle grinder. I'm gonna cut off the larger chunks just so it saves my grinder belts. And then we're just gonna profile this. So once the profile's done, we will clean the tang off a little bit, drill our pinholes. And then once that's done, we'll start grinding in our bevels. So kind of to walk you through everything we're gonna be doing today. So yeah, if you have any questions about anything, let me know in the comments. Hit that subscribe button so you know when I'm coming out with new stuff. So here we go, part 2. As always, safety first, ear protection, and when I'm doing my grinding, I like full face protection. Okay. Get it in the vise here and get to cutting off the extra bits. If you're wearing headphones, turn that volume down, my friends. Here we go. Alright, so we got the tail end cut off already. Now I'm going to trim up a little bit at the point, and then we'll head over to the grinder. It gets hot. All right, guys, so we got the tail end cut off right there. So what we're gonna do, I'm just gonna follow those lines. So typically, most of the knives I do, I'm not following lines because I'm not, but as I'm doing orders and stuff and I want to make sure they're nice and uniform across the board, this is the way I like to do it. That way they all match. Alrighty, so get my belt on here. So, got it pretty much profiled out, following the lines here. So here's what we got so far. So now the next step that I like to do to finish out the profiling of it is to get into this finger well here. I can get into it with the edge of the belt some, but I like to switch out the platen for a small wheel kit. So we'll get the small wheel kit, we'll clean that finger well out, and then we'll move on to cleaning off the tang, drilling the pinholes, all that good stuff. All right, so got it switched out to our small wheel kit. So what I like to use is, I like to kind of check and see, probably the middle size here. Slip that in there. Put our belt on. Do. All right. All right, so I'm working on 3 of these today. So I'm gonna knock out all 3. That's it. So that's the profile, done with that. So now I'm gonna put the platen back on. I'm gonna clean the tang off a little bit just to get the scale off, because that stuff gets really hard, can be really hard. So I'm gonna clean that off, and we'll drill our pinholes. So we got the platen back on. Let's clean these tangs off a little bit. So there's a difference between just cleaning the scale off and actually making sure this is nice and flat for when I get the handles on. So all I'm doing here is I'm just cleaning this off enough to where I can drill my holes, and then I'll come back later to make sure this is nice and flat, so that the handle goes on nice and evenly, there's no gaps, and it's good and secure. Got all the scale cleaned off, ready to drill our pinholes. All right, so we line up our holes, figure out right where that's gonna go. Get my oil here. So trick here is to keep it oiled. It keeps your bit from getting too hot, as well as the knife steel from getting too hot, and you want to run your grinder at its slowest RPMs. So one, your bit's gonna last longer. That's the big thing. You can go through bits like water if you're not oiling them up very well. This one's a nice new bit. You're not trying to just like, you're not trying to kill it. The harder you press, a couple things are going to happen. One, you're going to dull your bit really fast. The other thing that tends to happen if you try to muscle it through there too much is it'll grab hold of that steel and it'll start spinning that knife. Thankfully, I've never had any major injuries because of that. But all right, so this just vacuum this up to keep the steel from flying around. All right, get the next one drilled. So, bring this back up a little bit. So we got our, excuse me. So we got our pinholes drilled here. The next thing we go back to the grinder. What I like to do is I'll put a little little groove in the handle right down the middle on both sides. Just gives, when I epoxy up the handles, it gives the epoxy somewhere to go. So it's not all just squishing out. But then we'll work on, next thing we're gonna work on is grinding those bevels in. So, got our holes drilled. Time to start working on the blade here. So we'll get the bevels ground in, and I'll just kind of get the scratches out of the spine from the 36 grit belt. This is a 80 grit belt. I'll step it up to 120. And then once we get all that done, then we hand sand. It's all about safety, my friends. So I like to wear my hat low if I don't have my mask on. That way nothing's coming over the top and hitting me in my, over the top of my safety glasses here. idea what I'm doing here. So starting off, take just a little bit at a time, and I'm just slowly growing those bevels. They won't probably go very high. And then I leave a little bit of, about a dime's thickness on the edge here once I finish the bevels, so it leaves some room for the heat treat process, because I won't put that edge on until after the heat treat process is done and the handle is on. So the very last thing I do is put the edge on and sharpen it. Cool. All right, we'll just switch it up to the 120 grit belt just to get some scratches out, clean that up, and then we'll move on to the hand sanding. We've got our 80 grit belt switched out for a 120 grit belt. And we're just gonna get the scratches out a little bit just to clean these bevels up just a touch. And then make sure they're nice and even all the way up. I don't have multiple bevels. And then we'll move on to the hand sanding to clean them up even more. This usually only takes a few passes because I put a majority of my bevel in with the 80 grit, so it doesn't take much to go from the 80 to the 120 to get this out. So that's it for the 120 grit belt. Looks like I got most of the scratches out. It's a nice flat bevel on both sides. So in comparison, it's very, very subtle. So this one's only been done on the 120 grit here. And this one here has been, this one's only been done with the 80 grit. This one's been done with the 120 grit. But that just makes it easier to hand sand because I hand sand them at 120 before I heat treat. And then after the heat treat, I hand sand them up to 220, sometimes 400. And it just makes the bevel just look a lot cleaner. And the less, small grooves and scratches you have in your blade, it doesn't rust as easily. Final stage of this part of the process. We have profiled it out, cleaned the spine off a little bit, the tang, holes drilled. I haven't put in the fuller yet, and I'll do that after heat treat. But then the last thing I do is hand sand before I heat treat the knife. So this setup right here, I actually built this setup before I got any power tools, and I was going to use it with files, and it didn't end up working. So this worked out beautifully for a hand sanding jig. So all I do, I clamp this down. You never want the pokey end sticking out, or it'll grab you. So all I do is put it on here, clamp it down, and then I take my 120 grit sandpaper. I wrap it around a little block of wood so that I got a nice flat surface. It doesn't eat my fingers up, and I sand away. So let's zoom you in here so you can see kind of what I'm doing. Other trick I have learned from other bladesmiths is a little bit of Windex. So just the moisture helps to make the sandpaper last a little bit longer, helps to sand it a little bit faster, and the ammonia in the Windex keeps it from rusting on you. Because you're using water. If you're using water, it tends to rust pretty quick. I don't know if you noticed that earlier in the video about dunk it in that bucket of water to keep the steel from getting too hot. And rust up on you. That's okay. Before the heat treat. After the heat treat, I do my very best to keep it from rusting on me, just so that I don't create more work for myself at the tail end of it. I have to clean it real good. Clean that rust off. Easier to keep it from rusting than it is to clean it off at the end, especially once you've sharpened it. So I always tell people, treat your knives like cast iron, and they'll stay rust free for you. Just when you get done using it, get a little coat of oil on there. It can be any oil you want. Or a little wax. I like to use Wicked Wax. The main ingredient in that, if I remember correctly, is beeswax. But seems to last a little bit longer than your typical oil. And the Wicked Wax is food safe. If I'm carrying a knife, it's almost always going to come in contact with food, especially if I'm camping. You know, your knife is used for everything. And so I don't want to be spraying it with WD-40 or anything like that. But WD-40 works if you don't care if it's not food safe. I know plenty of guys that like the WD-40, especially for like a camp chopper. If you're not gonna, if you know you're not gonna be cooking with it or anything like that. These knives will hopefully be used for quartering out deer. Deer season coming up. These small EDCs and skinning knives are a hot commodity. They also tend to be real popular at Christmas time, so once I get this big order done, I'll probably be doing several more just so I'm well stocked in case anybody wants to purchase one. So here's the tricky part of the hand sanding process. So I've already gotten here to here nice and clean. But getting right up in this groove without sanding off all of the scale is the tricky part, my friend. Sometimes I like knife making because you're just in your own world with your own thoughts, thinking about whatever you want to think about. And other times I don't like it, because let's be honest, I think we all have moments where we don't like being in our own heads. That's one reason why I struggle with deer hunting sometimes. You're out in the woods. At least with this, I'm busy. My hands are busy. I generally like to keep from having idle hands. Idle hands will get you in trouble. This is the part where your mind tends to wander. All right, just about got it. All right, so that's it. I'm going to stay on the other side. But it's nice and clean. I mean, that's a beautiful beveled edge, a nice satin finish on there. There's nothing wrong with leaving the grind lines on there. I know plenty of guys that do, and it looks great. I just like this look a little bit better. So I put a little extra time into it. If you compare the two, so there's the difference it makes. A nice satin finish. And after the heat treat, what I will do is I will sand this again with 120 to get all the decarb off. Then I will sand it again at 220, and it'll just clean up that satin finish a little bit better. But it just looks nicer, a little extra work. Doesn't take a lot of extra work, in my opinion, if you do it this way. If you do it after you heat treat, it takes a lot of extra work. But I found this way to be the trick. But we got the spines all nice and cleaned up. And I'm going to continue working on this bevel. And they'll be ready for heat treat, and that'll be our next video. Thank you for watching. If you'd give it a like, give me a comment, hit that subscribe button. I'd greatly appreciate it. It goes a long way. And like I said at the beginning of the video, I still have not come up with a great name. I have a couple of ideas that I'm still throwing around. So if you have an idea of a good name for this knife, drop it in the comments. Let me know. If you come up with a name that that's the name, that's it, I'll send you a PKV sticker. But so the next video is going to be the heat treat process. I'll walk you through what I do to harden the blade, all that fun stuff. That'll be probably a pretty short video, but the heat treat process usually takes a full day of soaking it in the forge, controlling the temperature, quenching it, and the temper process is what usually takes a long time. So stick around, hit that subscribe button so you'll know when the next video comes out. Thanks for watching.